Hey guys! Because of what direction I'm wanting to have my channel go in, I thought that this would be an appropriate first video. Just telling you about my experience in an MLM, which was vector marketing, and you sell Cutco products. So a lot of times you'll see it called either one. You can see it called Vector or Cutco. Let's just clear the air. I am anti-MLM. I do believe that it is a predatory business practice, and I don't support it. That doesn't mean I have any hard feelings against people in MLMs. I don't have any hard feelings against people that I worked with in my MLM. I don't hate you. My next video is going to be debunking anti-MLM myths, because I do think that there are a lot of preconceived notions about anti-MLMers that come from the uplines that are not true. I had a relatively good experience in my MLM, which I'm very lucky to have had, because the nature of the sales tactics that they use in vector marketing are very unsafe when I look back on it. I'll go more into that later, but it's not a safe job. So I'm very lucky that I had a good experience with it, because there have been cases in the past that vector marketing has gotten in trouble where a girl was put in a very unsafe situation, and I think that's very sad. So I joined vector marketing in 2019 when I was a high school graduate. I actually joined before I had actually graduated from high school. It was about maybe like 2 weeks before, but I was 18 years old. And what's actually different with vector marketing versus a lot of other MLM companies is that the minimum age is 17 instead of 18, which is not a good thing, even though I was still in high school and that is still very predatory. I was 18 years old. Now, a lot of people are already familiar with vector marketing, whether you know it or not. It usually targets college students and people fresh out of high school like myself. I feel like everybody's kind of gotten one of those letters inviting them to come in for an interview, which is also something different that Vector does versus other MLM companies. It makes you feel like you're applying for a real job because there is an interview. I wouldn't consider it a real interview. I've had other jobs in the past, and my interview with Vector was completely different than other interviews that I've had, and I don't really believe that they deny very many people. Like pretty much every other MLM company, if it breathes, they will recruit you. So the way that I was actually recruited is that I got a message from a girl that I had worked with in the past in a workshop. I got a message from her inviting me to apply to work with her in this great job opportunity that offers college scholarships and financial freedom, time freedom, make your own schedule, the classics. At the time, I was very interested in trying to find a job. I had been applying at different places because I really wanted to make some money before going off to college. So the message was very vague. She didn't really mention the company name. She did tell me it was a sales job. She didn't tell me what we were going to be selling. So at first I was a little sketched out. Like, are we not supposed to be doing this? So I asked her, I was like, what's the name of the company? Like, what are we doing? And she was like, oh, it's called Vector Marketing. We sell Cutco knives. You're selling kitchen cutlery. So I was like, okay. At the time in 2019, this was really before the big anti-MLM community had started. So when I was going into this, I didn't really know what an MLM was. I didn't know what network marketing was, and I did not know what Vector was. So I tried to do some research, but I couldn't really find anything online, hardly at all at the time. There weren't any deep dive videos or anything like that like there is now. There was no information. I found some information online about past lawsuits that had already been resolved, and so I was like, they already fixed the problem, so what harm could it do? I did find a couple of videos on YouTube with people talking about their experiences working with Vector, but they weren't very concise. It was all just kind of like, I worked there for a week and I quit because it was sketchy, and I was like, well, that doesn't really tell me anything about like working for the company if you were there for a week. And so I really didn't trust that. I was like, I want to make my own judgment. How it works when you get hired for the job is that they give you a demo kit, they teach you how to use it. It's got like a couple of knives, and you have a book that you read out of, and it's worth $80. If you want to keep it after you're finished working for the company, then you can pay the $80, or you can just turn it back in at the end, which is what I did. Unlike a lot of other MLM companies, there isn't a buy-in with Vector Marketing unless you keep your demo kit. So I went into the interview. It was all day. She went into like how at Vector Marketing they try to give people an unconventional job opportunity when they're young so that they have something different to put on their resume, which, knowing what I know now, is not helpful to put an MLM on your resume, because a lot of managers will see that and then just throw out your resume. But that is what I was told. So I stayed for the second interview, which was also really weird. They encouraged us to take notes for some reason. And they showed us several videos. Some of them were like customer testimonials, and then some of them were other sales rep testimonials, and then like stuff about the history of the business and stuff. It was very, very weird for a job interview. And then they like asked us questions afterwards. It was like a school lesson. Funny enough, nobody who had been in my second interview came back. So I'm guessing that I was the only one who was stupid enough to stay. Now, the thing about training in Vector Marketing is that it is not paid, which is very unprofessional, because these are all day training sessions, like multiple days, all day long, completely unpaid. And you have to be there. Why am I showing up? In any other job, you absolutely get paid for that training time, because you are getting paid an hourly wage, which was not the case for Vector Marketing. I was the only girl in my training. Vector Marketing is more of a male-dominated company. A lot of times you'll see within MLMs the companies with more tangible products, such as the makeup MLMs, shampoo MLMs, supplements, that sort of thing. Those are all more female-dominated, but then companies without tangible products, those are more male dominated. So Vector is one of those that is one of the only male dominated tangible product MLMs. I was one of the only girls the majority of the time that I worked there, besides my manager, who was a girl. I was very lucky with the boys that I worked with. I really liked them. We all got along very well. None of them were creepy, but I know that in cases in the past that's not been the case. There's been a lot of complaints about sexual assault with people working within Vector Marketing. I was very lucky that most of the time that is not going to be the case. You are obviously taught to read from a script, and you kind of work the script into your sales pitch. When you're first starting out, you let customers know, hey, I'm going to be reading from a script, and it's going to help me make sure that I get all of the information to you. In a lot of other cases in MLMs, people try to hide that they're using a script. I do appreciate that they're very upfront about using a script and they work it into their sales presentation, but at the same time, it does still feel very ingenuine. I also want to preface this next part in saying that the way that I sold Cutco knives versus the way that people sell them now is a little bit different, even though it was just 2 years ago. We were taught how to give online presentations if you couldn't meet somebody in person, but that was definitely not the forefront when I was in the company. Now they primarily do their presentations online over Zoom, so my experience is going to be a little bit different from how they give sales presentations now. I hope that they stay doing their sales presentations online primarily, because it is going to be a lot safer than the way that we were taught. I hope that they stay mostly online. That's not likely because of the way that they train you to do your sales presentations. I feel that they will transition to going back in person, which is a shame. So here's how I was trying to find customers and give presentations. Of course, like in most MLMs, your first customers are going to be people that you know really well. Close family members, parents of close friends, teachers, people who you go to church with, those sort of people. They did train you not to present to people who could not afford to buy the knives. They didn't want you to present to young people. Really, the rule of thumb was that you wanted married people who own a house and have like full-time jobs and that sort of thing. So they don't want you presenting to people who they assume couldn't afford them. In most MLMs, you pitch to everybody, even if the prices are outrageous, which they always are. Basically, you would call these people and then you would go to their house by yourself. And when you're first starting out, there's like a halftime where you are supposed to call your manager. I know at some other offices, the manager would actually make you stay on the phone with them during the entire appointment when you would first start out. My manager did not do that. I think that's really weird. We would just call our manager at the halfway point in our presentation just to check in. Now I know the point of that halftime call is actually to make sure that you're giving the presentation, because your base pay in the company is per appointment. It's not per hour. Your base pay is per appointment. So they want to make sure that you're giving the sales presentation and not just telling them that you're going to appointments and taking in the money and then not actually giving the presentation. Starting off, I really did take it very seriously. I tried to get in as many appointments as I could during the weekends because I didn't want to work during the week. I really did try to sell the products, even though I knew that most of the people who I was presenting to wouldn't be able to afford the products. I wanted to be a good sales representative, and I did not sell. I did not sell. They really present you with this facade that anybody can afford these knives and that you're paying for the quality, and that's why they're so expensive. If you break down the numbers, then even people who work a minimum wage job would be able to afford the knives. So it is pretty contradictory to act like anybody can afford the knives if you just paid in the payments, but then on the other hand, they say not to sell to people who don't make a certain income, but that's just one of those contradictory things that pretty much any MLM has. So you're really at a disadvantage if you don't have rich family and friends. I discovered that really quickly. The only person that I recruited while I was in the company was my boyfriend at the time, who came from a very wealthy family, and he did really good in the sales position because his family could afford to buy the knives. I, on the other hand, I did not have wealthy family members. I did not have wealthy friends that I could sell them to. So I really didn't make a lot of sales. I really didn't make that much money. And when I realized that it was really unlikely that I was going to be making good money selling these knives, is when I started using a different tactic to get paid. For legal purposes, this is all alleged. What I started doing to try and bring in a little bit more income was I started booking appointments with just friends from school, just different teenagers. Basically just be like, yeah, this is pretty much what my job is. This is what I do. These are the knives. If you want to know more, I can tell you more, but I'm really just doing this because I want to get paid. I started making fake appointments because I was really desperate to bring in the money for it. They tell you constantly, don't schedule appointments with people who can't afford it, but it was to the point where I was having so little appointments with people who could afford it that I couldn't afford to pay the gas to go to those appointments because I wasn't getting paid. So I started making bullshit appointments. I would schedule like 1 or 2 real appointments every weekend, and then I would schedule multiple bullshit appointments every weekend so that I could potentially make a couple of sales, so that it didn't look suspicious that I was having all these appointments and I wasn't selling anything, which happened to a couple of other people who were then asked to leave the company because they got caught doing this. So that's what I would do. We were going through a very hard time financially, and I needed a job. This was the only job that I could get. Now, the other thing that I think is completely unfair about the companies is that pretty much every office is going to require you to have weekly team meetings, which are, again, unpaid. Basically, all it was we would have a couple of hours of a phone jam, which is basically just making a bunch of calls and trying to book a bunch of appointments for the weekend. And then they would talk about who made the most money the past week, which was very awkward. And then we would do like a activity. It was almost like we were just hanging out. Like, I don't want to pretend that it felt like work, because it didn't feel like work. It felt like I was going to an office to hang out with a bunch of guys. I also did go to a couple of the conferences and a couple of the meetings that would happen periodically. They were completely unpaid training events. You would be there all day. You would have to drive yourself, pay for your own gas, pay for your own food. You would have to dress up really nice. And you would go to these events. You would hear a bunch of speeches and you would take a bunch of notes. You weren't being paid for a bit of it. In fact, you were losing money going to these events, and they were very weird. They did not feel like work events. There was yelling and screaming and cheering and chanting, and it was so weird. You just knew that it wasn't normal. The managers would get really into it. People who were high up in the company would get really into it, but the normal sales representatives, we hated going to these events. Even though they were technically not mandatory, we were very much pressured to go to these events. You were pretty much told if you didn't go to these training events that you weren't going to be as good as the others and you weren't going to make as much money. You felt like you had to go to these events. You would go and lose money, waste your day in a hotel ballroom with a bunch of people who are making money off of your Something that I really didn't understand when I was working for Vector Marketing was the recruitment process. As many people know with other MLMs, where you really make your money is going to be in recruitment. It is not going to be in sales, which is why it's often referred to as like a hidden pyramid scheme. So for a long time, I believed that Vector Marketing was different because even though I recruited somebody, I never got a part of their commission. I never made money off of my recruitment. I thought that in Vector, you didn't make a percentage of somebody else's sales. And I really commended that for them until I came to the realization that what actually happened is that he was put into the company under my manager's name. It was not under my name, and she was making the commissions off of him. Even though I was the one who recruited him, I didn't see a single penny of his commissions. It all went under my manager. People will open these offices pretending to be a manager and recruit a couple of people themselves and then make money off of everybody else's recruits, while the people who are actually recruiting aren't even making the money from the people they recruit. In my opinion, that makes it even worse than a pyramid scheme, because at least in a pyramid scheme, the person who recruits is making money off of the person they recruit. Then you're not even making money off the person you recruit. Your manager is. Something else that I really want to go over is how poorly trained you are. They talk all the time about how you're going to get all of this training from your manager, which is not true per se. Most of the time when I asked my manager a question outside of our training days, the only answer I was given was, here, watch this video, and that was it. Really didn't, which led to me really not understanding what I was doing. I did not understand how the sales worked until my assistant manager told me. He taught me how to not scam myself, which went against what the company teaches you. You're taught to include free items with somebody's purchase. What they don't tell you is the cost of those free items is taken out of your commissions. So you are making less money when you give those free items away. But they don't tell you that. They just teach you to give out the free item. And I did not learn that until my assistant manager told me before he left the company, because he didn't want me to keep losing money when I made sales. And I was losing money, and it really sucked. So even though there isn't an initial buy-in to the company, you are going to lose money in the long run, because you are paying for your own gas. You are paying for any foods that you want to use in demonstrations. If you want to show off and demonstrate any extra knives or products that aren't in your demo kit, which you are encouraged to do, you have to pay for that yourself. Any free items that you give away is taken out of your commissions. You are losing money, whether you realize it or not. You are given the option to be a 1099 independent consultant, or you're given the option to be a W-2 employee under that manager. Either you file all of your own taxes at the end of the year, or you are given a W-2 at the end of the year and your taxes are already taken out. When you are being trained, they justify all of these personal expenses by telling you about how you can write off all of these business expenses when you do your taxes at the end of the year. However, what they don't tell you is that if you sign up to be a W-2 employee, you cannot write off those expenses. So I signed up to be a W-2 employee, and I was not told that I would not be able to write off those expenses at the end of the year, and I just lost money. I just simply lost money. I did end up leaving the company before I went to college, so I was only working for the company for a couple of months. Did I have the best experience? No. Did I make a ton of money? No. I essentially cheated my way to the money. Multi-level marketing is a very predatory business practice, and if they're going to take money from innocent people, then the innocent people get to take money back, and that's what I believe. So no, I don't regret what I did. If you are wondering more specifics about the company itself instead of my personal experience, I am going to leave a link to a deep dive down below, and I will also leave a couple of links to some different videos that have mentioned different experiences in Cutco. I know that it can essentially turn into a he said, she said, so I do want the resources out there that I did not have when I was joining Vector Marketing, because I feel like if there were videos like this out when I was being recruited, I would not have joined. So yeah, that is basically my experience working for Vector Marketing / Cutco Cutlery. I had a relatively good experience. I have nothing to say negatively about my coworkers, but the business itself is not beneficial to its representatives. The people at the top of the pyramid really are making money off of you, whether you realize it or not. And that's very sad because vector marketing does target very young people, and so I think they count on people not being aware of what multi-level marketing is and what working for them is really going to require. So I do want to put this video out as a resource to people like myself who are just graduating high school or young college students who are being recruited into this company, because it is not going to help you, because it is not going to be everything that they tell you it is. The base pay is simply not enough unless you're doing multiple appointments every single day, or you're selling thousands of dollars of knives every day. You're not going to make the money that they're going to promise you that you make. So if you have made it to the end of the video, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to my story. I will be putting out more videos in the future because this is a movement that I'm very passionate about, and I'm tired of seeing innocent people and vulnerable people losing money to these predatory companies. So on that note, I hope we will see you in my next video. Say bye, Charlie.